Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Goodnow. I'm chair of the Brattleboro Selectboard. It is May 3rd, and this is our Selectboard meeting. So, Yoshi, has the meeting been properly warned?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. And I have a motion on the minutes.
Sure. I move that we accept the minutes
Can I just get a date on this?
of April 19th.
Great. Jess has moved to approve the minutes of April 19th, 2022. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. All right. Chair remarks. So I just have two quick things. First is the Brooks Memorial Library is having their 5-year strategic plan, and they have a survey, or they're redoing their strategic plan, and they have a survey on their website. And I would encourage people who use the library or who are interested in using the library to go to the website and take the survey so that they can better understand how to serve the residents of our town. They do a great job already, but we can always work to make it better. And then the other is that this coming Friday, the 6th, is our first gallery walk of the season. So very exciting. And I would encourage people to come out and enjoy what has for last year was just such a wonderful sort of reprieve and being outdoors for the pandemic being a little lessened. So hopefully we have a really successful gallery walk this year, and hopefully I'll see you there. So Yoshi, manager's comments?
No comments.
Great. Thank you. Select board comments. Squid.
Thank you. I wanted to do a thank you to the Public Works Department. Those of us who travel on the roads may have noticed potholes this winter, and some potholes remain, but that's okay. That is fairly normal, but there have been some new kind of methods for patching potholes this year that have employed the sidewalk tractor with an additional asphalt cold planer. I had to ask Dan what it was called. And so like on Putney Road, Western Avenue, Cedar Street, a few other places that I'm forgetting now, you'll see like these really substantial improvements to the road surface, and they should hopefully last a lot longer than, the usual kind of method of filling in potholes. And I don't know, I just felt like it was like an example of a versatile use of equipment, and the department really kind of working to kind of get the most out of our infrastructure for the benefit of the people of the town. And I just wanted to say thanks.
This sidewalk plow is a really versatile item.
Mm. Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome.
Any other comments?
I don't have any comments.
Yeah, Jess, please.
Sure. In addition to Gallery Walk this weekend, I am super excited about the return of the Brattleboro Farmers Market, which will also be happening this weekend on Saturday from 10 to 2, 10 to 2 out on Western Avenue. And yeah, I'm excited. Go support local makers and vendors and farmers and go enjoy the beautiful weekend.
Yeah, and is Gallery Walk 5 to
9 or 10?
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Public participation. So this is an opportunity for the public to speak on anything that isn't on the agenda tonight. So I'll start with looking to the members of the public here in the room, and then we'll look to Zoom.
Public in the
Yes.
room.
Kate, how are you?
Good. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. My name's Kate O'Connor from Brattleboro. I've got two things, and they won't surprise you what they are. But the first one is a shout out actually to the fire department. To make a horrible story short, I had a tree in my yard that fell down was huge. It hit the power lines on Grove Street. So they were hanging over the street. The fire department came, closed both ends of the road, and waited until Green Mountain Power came and stopped the people who you would think would avoid a live power line, who don't, told them to go on the other side of the road. So the fire department was like super helpful. And I just want to do that shout out. Now, the other issue is the EMS issue. And I just want to go back to the April 19th meeting for just a second. At that meeting, one of you read from the charter, the section that says the select board has a responsibility to provide and maintain an ambulance service. And that was a little bit disconcerting for me that the charter was being used as a means to marginalize the public. You didn't have to listen to us because it's in the charter. So I'm just hoping that that doesn't happen again with that, the EMS issue or any other issue, because there are other things in the charter that the select board has responsibility to provide and maintain. So I'm hoping that that won't happen again, because I think it's a bad road to go down. And also I hope, and I'm sure folks have reflected on that meeting, but I hope that you realize what a big issue this is for the town. The Golden Cross contract is done. That's a done thing until June 30th, 2023. But going forward, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made on whether the fire department does it, whether they don't do it. It's about health and safety, and it could have long-term impacts on our town budget. We're told it's going to raise a lot of money, but that might not be true. And I know you're hiring a consultant to go forward. So what I am hoping that you folks will do is really commit to open and honest public discussion, timely updates, transparency, going forward, because that's the only way we're going to get through this as a community. I want to make a suggestion that I hope you'd consider. Golden Cross said at the last meeting, or somebody here said at the last meeting, that Golden Cross is going to be providing reports to the town monthly. And I'm assuming those are going to be coming, public at a select board meeting. What I would like you to consider is putting the EMS subject on every select board agenda under unfinished business. And I say that because there may be things that happen, after. You may have natural things that happen that the town manager knows in advance that will be warned at every meeting. But there may be something that happens after the meeting morning, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that if it's not on the agenda to have a discussion about the EMS, we won't talk about it for another month. It also gives the public the opportunity to ask questions if they need to. We did this when the town discussed the police fire facility. It was on every agenda. And sometimes the select board chair turned to the town manager, said, "Is there anything?" Town manager said, "No." They said, "Does anyone in the public have anything?" No. But it gives us the opportunity to keep the discussion going, not waiting a month to find important things out, because, I don't want to rehash everything, but I think it would go a long way in sort of restoring faith in you folks that the town really needs right now. So I just ask you to consider that. And I hope in your goals, I know I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I hope in your goals, there'll be some givens. And from now on, givens will be public participation, timeliness, and transparency. So that's all I have to say. I know you can't respond because it's not an agenda item. So I know that. So thank you. And I'm going to go home and watch you on TV. So I don't want you to think I'm abandoning you. I'm going home. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kate. Yeah. And it's kind of an awkward situation where you can't really respond, but I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anyone in the public with their hand? Bob Ozer.
I think I'm here.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Hi. So, how are you all, first of all? and I really can't see you, so I don't know if that's because there's no video feed on your end or if it's a problem on my end. But just pointing that out. So I'll wave over here. So yeah, trying to do this briefly, but just following along with the same subject that Kate had broached on the issue of rescue and the EMS services. And I don't want to talk about, certainly I don't want to talk about the merits of the decision, because that was finally decided on April the 19th. But, and again, you probably can't respond, but maybe make a note of this for the future, or to have a future discussion, that to somehow debrief the decision-making process on that issue. And we don't know a lot about it, but there are some details that are now coming out in the media, or at least being talked about in the media. So it certainly appears that a position was articulated on a February 9th meeting. And it certainly appears, I think we can justly say, that there was a lot of frustration that developed after that meeting. And we're getting now dribs and drabs of facts or factoids out of that. But nothing happened then until much later. And so you all can sit down with yourselves and kind of ask yourselves how that transpired, how that frustration developed, and maybe even bring in a neutral third party to help with that debriefing. And the reason for that is to avoid having a situation like this again in the future. If we have, you know, a situation where two parties can agree to disagree and they can still shake hands and leave, that's fine. If it becomes a protracted issue that now needs to play out in the public through the media, that's not as good, obviously. So how did that happen? You can't answer that, but I'm hoping that you will commit to talk amongst yourselves about it and to figure out how not to have that transpire in the future. Then secondly, the public was first advised of the decision, or the proposal, I should say, on April the 11th. And there was a memo or a press release that went out on that date. Then there were details provided on April the 15th, which is a Friday, through the backup materials for the Selectboard meeting. And there was one info session that was held on April the 18th. And a decision was then made the very next day, April the 19th. That doesn't really seem appropriate for this issue. Why did that occur? There were two info sessions that occurred after the decision was made. But that doesn't make a lot of sense, actually. So on the 19th, the board heard several requests from the community to pause the decision-making process and to take a closer look at this. You may have read in the newspaper, a former select board member has even written that the decision needs to be revisited. So I doubt that that's possible if you've already signed a contract. I would think that's a legal question there. But it's interesting that a former select board person would say that at this point. So in the future, in a similar situation, I would suggest and maybe urge you to have almost the same procedure that's done with ordinances, where there's a second reading, that there's a publication, that the decision making is done in a very orderly fashion in that way. And if the select board is so inclined, you could even figure out how to word that and put that on the ballot as a charter revision. But it seems that this kind of a decision needed more input. Second reading may be a way to do that. And the last point I'd like to make is actually following up with what Kate said. The budget that was provided in the April 15th backup materials, I think really does need some further analysis. Does it shortchange the fire department in the resources that are actually needed to do this job effectively? We have a refurbished and a used ambulance in there. Is that really appropriate at this point? There's an assumption that a grant will come down for a 3-year grant, the Saver grant. I had a private discussion, and someone had mentioned possibly ARPA funds being used. Well, I think those special kind of funding mechanisms should be taken out, and we should look at what this would cost without those special funds, because it's an ongoing budget. The 3 years will be up soon. The ARPA funds are one shot. What's it going to cost in the long run? What's it going to cost in year 4 and year 5? So I think we need to know that kind of upfront. Now, hopefully that's already being thought about with the strategic plan or the strategic survey, which will come through. So those are the only points I wanted to make about that. But thank you for your time, and have a good meeting.
Thank you very much, Bob. Is there anyone else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Dave.
Dave, yeah. Hi, Dick.
Hey, good morning or good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
I wanted to touch upon an issue that happened last night at the Void on Main Street, the break-in. And also, I believe, if it wasn't last night, a few nights ago at Sam's. And I have talked about this before as a former select board member. And we did put cameras on Elliott Street. And I'm asking the board to either start a committee or get on the agenda the possibility of getting cameras in numerous locations downtown and other areas where they believe there are high areas of crime. I certainly have had problems up in West Brattleboro with severe vandalism and theft of flowers that I have put up there, and asked that the town install cameras to possibly curb that activity. And I believe this is a select board decision. But I think it is extremely important for the town to look at starting to get cameras in strategic places downtown. You can't go anywhere in Boston, New York, name a big city, where you can't take 2 steps and your face isn't on a camera. And we have a lot of crime in our community. We have a lot of drug activity. And, you know, when I talked to the town manager, I talked briefly to Yoshi about this, and I want to extreme very briefly, but former town manager Peter about cameras, and he was saying that the town doesn't do surveillance. I would like you to answer that question, and if not, why not? But I think it's imperative that we get cameras up, and you know, one of the things that Peter said is that businesses can put cameras up. Yes, they can. But there are things going on in the street that if we had cameras up, they don't prevent crime, they help you solve crime. And I think this is a topic that certainly people downtown have talked to me about multiple times. And I think this is a good time to start a discussion into possibly looking at getting cameras downtown to protect the community, and not only businesses, but homes within our community. And I'll wait for your response to my question.
Thank you very much, Dick. As you're very aware, we can't respond to public participation comments. So I think that, we appreciate the comment and we can take it under consideration, but, and I'll let Patrick, if you want to unmute him. But I think that, as you're aware from your time on the select board, the time for public participation is to bring up items that aren't on the agenda, and the board can't speak to them directly because they haven't been properly warned as items, so that other members of the community who may want to speak on an issue that's brought up in public participation, they wouldn't know about it. And so to maintain that really important warning, so that people know when to come to meetings to speak on issues, I would say that I'm going to choose to decline to answer the question, but appreciate the points that you've made.
At the risk of
Since I haven't been there for a while,
discussion I shouldn't jump into. For what it's worth, the Brattleboro Police Department arrested the person who broke into the void this afternoon.
Okay, I appreciate a point of information.
Just a little bit of information.
Yeah.
Can I just make a general statement that, I've heard a similar comment from a few other people, and I'm certainly going to help those people advocate for us talking about it soon. Yeah. In an appropriate, warned way, and possibly even with Norma joining us. I think it would be appropriate.
Agreed. I think
police chief.
Yeah, I think it would be important to pull the police department in on this discussion as well.
So just wanted to reassure Dick he's heard.
Yes, absolutely. I hear you. But yeah. Is that any other comment on it?
well, am I still muted or am I on?
You're on.
It's been so long since I've been on the board. A citizen can request something being put on the agenda.
Absolutely.
I think you can give me that information. I can't remember how that's done. How is that done?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure that the information on how to request an item be put on the agenda.
He means now.
Oh,
Dick, you were asking how does somebody get something on the agenda?
I can't remember how it's done.
Yeah.
I know citizens can do that.
Yes.
And all I'm saying is you can give that information. That isn't.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I'd be happy to. So you need to request that an item be put on the agenda to a member of the select board or the municipality, like town manager's office, before noon on the Wednesday prior to the Warren select board meeting the week after. So, and then it's considered by the agenda setting committee, which is made up of the chair and the vice chair. And then depending on their determination, it's either put on the agenda or the board is notified that we've chosen not to. And then one of the other select board members could choose to request to put it on the agenda at that warned meeting in a public setting.
Okay, thank you. I vaguely remember that, but the older I get, the more I forget.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dick. All right. That's it. Great. Okay, so moving on to the consent agenda. Yoshi, would you mind speaking to the items that are on the consent agenda very briefly?
Yes, we have 4 items today. We have the A, Bike Walk Master Plan, which is a bid award. And we have number 2 is Bylaw Modernization Contract, which is the award contract. C, the Local Emergency Management Plan, which is the annual readoption. And D, which is the grader replacement, which is the bid award.
Great. And as we're kind of just reminding everybody of processes here, so for the consent agenda, we put these items on that we feel are thoroughly discussed in the backup material, and to help to shorten the meetings so that we're not forcing people to discuss into the wee hours of the morning. So during the public participation section, people can request that board members pull items from the agenda. And then at this moment, board members can pull items from the agenda if they wish to do so.
Right. And I guess like another way somebody could do it is they see what's on our agenda, they see what's in the consent agenda, and they email one of us and say,
Totally.
or call one of us or send us a piece of mail saying, please, discuss this item.
Yes. And maybe they have a specific question and yeah.
But mostly the things that are on the consent agenda are pretty routine, non-controversial things.
Yes.
But important.
Yes, important.
And that the backup is always present.
Yes. And thorough. So with that in mind, does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? In that case, I'd entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll speed things along. I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Danielle's moved to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. So, Jess.
I move that we convene as liquor commissioners.
Jess has moved that we convene as liquor commissioners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. So do we have Hillary? No. Hillary or Patrick?
Patrick.
Patrick.
Sorry. So this is a first-class liquor license application from the Hermit Thrush Brewery so that they are able to sell their beer in their tap room at their facility on High Street. They have previously had a first-class liquor license at this location. Throughout the pandemic, they've allowed it to lapse as they've been conducting business in the Parklet, which was organized in the High Grove parking lot. They are now seeking to sort of reestablish their presence within their facility and are seeking your approval for a first-class liquor license. The staff have reviewed it and have nothing but encouraging remarks. And I noticed Chris Gagne is in the meeting if you would like to hear from the business owner.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear from Chris for a moment. He wants to queue up.
If I can find it. There it is.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Super. Yes. Thanks, Patrick. Very well described. It's our original location, and we plan to open to indoor service again. And we still plan on the same hours, 11 is our earliest start and 9 is our latest open hour. We close at 9 daily and often earlier. So looking to continue to serve tastes and be a quiet little sour beer bar.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any discussion from the board? Please.
Is this such a hopeful sign of something opening up after the pandemic?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I thought I saw it in the material, but Chris, are you continuing with the parking lot section as well?
Yeah, we hope to continue to offer the outdoor component. I think some people are comfortable being indoors without masks. Some people are less comfortable with that. So we just want to cater to everybody. And I will say we have pretty robust air handling for the indoor space now. So we'll be able to evacuate that airspace every 5 minutes or so. But yeah, nevertheless, some people, I think, still prefer outdoors.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Any others?
I've got a motion.
I'm just going to make sure that we don't have any comments from the public. Great. Jess?
I move that we approve a first-class liquor license for the Hermit Thrush Tap Room located at Suite 101C.
Great. Jess has made a motion to approve a first-class liquor license for the Hermit Thrush Tap Room located at Suite 101C High Street?
29 High Street.
29 High Street.
Yes. Wait.
Or is that
definitely High Street?
Yeah.
It says 29 here.
As we're in Suite 101C. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I move to adjourn as liquor commissioner.
Excellent. Liz has moved that we adjourn as liquor commissioners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Moving on to unfinished business. All right, folks. Select board goals. Yoshi, do you want to speak
Sure.
just briefly to the so as we're aware, the board took a long, robust discussion over what we're thinking about for goals. Then we requested that Yoshi, with town staff input, work that into a list and maybe add or reword things to ways that they felt maybe would be better served for us. And so if you want to just speak to that for a moment.
Sure.
And
Yeah. So, this is what the goals I took from your original goals, and then they added and areas that you were looking to do. And then what we had is the staff reviewed those goals that were relevant to each of those departments and made some changes, which were included. I am a little bit, one thing is I'm going to have to, some of the changes in here, if I did it in color, I'm realizing it now that you can actually see. I realized
Are they in color on the
document? The document online is in color. So if you looked on the online, and I just realized that when I looked at it, that is not in color, and that's my mistake. Next time, what I'll do is I'll highlight to make sure that it comes across in the black and white. But there wasn't substantial changes. There were mostly additions. So for instance, like the last section, recreation and parks. Was something that added by the recreation department.
And for the public who is looking at it online, potentially, what do the highlighted sections, the colored sections indicate?
They just indicated either changes to wording, or they were additional items.
Okay,
so there's only a couple.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Yoshi. Yes.
How could somebody find that document online?
Well, they could go.
Tell me if you know how to do it.
I was thinking if
Daniel can tell.
Danny, you want to tell us how to do it?
Oh, come on. It was a good test. Go to brattleboro.org and then go to the select board page and then go to draft minutes and supporting documents. Then scroll down all the way to the bottom of the page.
From the beginning of time.
From the beginning of time to the one that says backup material. Then you get an agenda and click on the bit that says select board goals, and you will be magically and so conveniently taken to this item.
Bam.
Better than courier by far.
Yeah.
Or pigeon.
So
slightly quicker.
Before we get into comments, I think that considering that the goals are only 3 pages, I think maybe we just move down categories again and kind of have any discussion that we want on each of them. If everyone has looked at that and feels good about where it's at, we can just move on to the next one. But I think just to keep the conversation focused, I think that's going to be the best way to go about it. So does that work for you, Liz, or did you have a?
It does.
Yes, excellent. So if you want to go ahead.
And I have something on the first item.
Excellent, thank you.
So these are fine.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I think there's a focus on transparency, which is great. But I think that the kernel of the purpose is a little bit lost because, I think the thrust of our ARPA funds is for municipal purposes. And these words seem to lose that kernel of truth that municipal funding is going to be spent on primarily municipal actions. And we might want to say that.
And the select board will be responsible for that. And these are our goals.
Exactly. So let's,
Any thoughts?
I had that highlighted. You can tell I don't have my highlighter out. I already have this. My comment was that we really do already have a defined, transparent, accessible process for allocation and distribution of American Rescue Plan Act funds, and that is called our normal transparent process of select board meetings. Hopefully we will still be following those processes.
I would imagine so.
I also feel that 1 and 2 are a little duplicative. Is that the right word? Yes. They're sort of the same thing, and they possibly could be merged. I don't know. But so I think we are already well designed to be listening to the public, to be. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we need to design a process if we're following our normal processes, but I'm ready to hear other opinions that this particular process needs a special treatment somehow.
Just like you were talking about with Mr. DeGray, if somebody in the public has an idea for ARPA funds and wants us to discuss it, just like any agenda item, they would reach out to one of us by that time to get it up for consideration for the agenda for a discussion.
Well, wouldn't there be an open meeting of ARPA for anyone who wishes to discuss it, to come and discuss it?
Yeah. So,
well, that's the question. Is there going to be an agenda item or?
I mean, yes, obviously. A little flippant.
I don't know.
So I had originally kind of like, I think, spoke to a desire for a transparent, accountable, accessible process for the use of these one-time funds. Brattleboro currently has 2.7 million sitting, awaiting full allocation, and it will be used for municipal purposes. And the people that decide how it gets used are these people sitting at this table here. And also, this is one-time money that, you know, some of the best practices around how to use this money are engaging with the public, not because we have no clue how to spend this. Like, you know, I'm sure the 5 of us right now could, you know, come up with a way to spend that 2.7 million. But, you know, it's important that the public is made aware that, you know, these meetings are happening where we're considering how to use this money appropriately. And I think an extra effort ought to be made to make folks aware of that. I'm not saying that the select board meetings aren't sufficient as a vehicle for that discussion, but I think we can make a little extra effort to let folks know.
I want to speak to, actually, no, please go ahead.
I was a little confused because I thought the process might, as described, continue on like, oh, there's a project that the town manager has identified would be a good allocation of these funds. That specific thing is on the agenda. We have a discussion about that and allocate that money. I thought that would be how we might proceed in like this, piecemeal. Like piecemeal, rather than having a meeting dedicated to it. So I want to clarify that. And I think, you know, I'm with Daniel. I'm with you that this is money that should go to the municipal sort of purposes and should be directed by us. But if there is a more accessible way than saying, oh, you can only speak on this one particular use of this money, it might be a better process. So.
What I'm hearing is
agreement.
I'm hearing agreement, but I'm also hearing that it is not quite as simple as we're just doing it in like a normal select board meeting. Like it may be like the exact process is going to have to be decided as we move forward with it. So, I don't know.
It sounds to me like there will be maybe a couple of meetings where the ARPA agenda is discussed and then a decision is made.
Yes.
When everyone is heard.
Yeah.
But that this would be the forum for it.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks to, like, I don't think I have thought it would be sort of like just piecemeal, like slowly. It would be kind of a discussion about but again, I guess that is kind of defining it in a way. So, but using the form of the select board meeting.
Sounds like we just defined
I think we did.
Accessible, accountable process.
Okay.
So I would suggest that this section be slightly revised to reflect the discussion and agreement that we all just had.
Classic select board move. Which is that, you know, we've kind of defined that we're going to use the select board forum as a way to discuss it, but that, you know, that will ensure that those meetings are, very well warned and people are aware of when we're going to be discussing them, and that it'll take multiple meetings and ensure that everyone's heard, and that we're going to be using these funds for municipal purposes.
Cool.
Very good.
To address, good.
So I'm trying to make sure I can get the
Yeah.
language correct. So I put use the select board forum to provide a transparent, accessible process for the allocation of distribution of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds for municipal purposes.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay.
great.
Tim's looking a little.
No,
I'm not sure we need a meeting to define it.
No, I'm taking it as a define.
No.
Is use the select board forum to provide.
Like the select board form as
So
the
I took out
form.
define.
Oh, sorry.
So I took out
heard
define.
again.
Yeah, I took out define.
Lovely.
And do you want to address your second point about
I just think they say the
redundancy?
same thing, sort of.
Yeah,
One and
yes,
two.
we
You want to
did.
take out second?
Take out two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll remove, listen to, and consider residents' interests.
Well, that's fair and accessible.
Oh, stop. Why
Why don't you take it and
Why
put it
don't
in
we have
parentheses and
a
stick it in the
longer
first?
number?
Do you want to
five?
add? Would you like to add two to one
Yes,
Oh.
add 2 to 1.
All right, I will figure out how to
to sort of
put that in there.
incorporate that? Okay. Are there any other comments on the other items in COVID Recovery American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds category? Liz.
That's
Lovely.
number 5. I can imagine that we can ask Patrick, because I think it was widely discussed that a hybrid meeting was not good for various reasons that are peculiar to representative town meeting.
Oh,
Was that the
hybrid.
case, Patrick?
Oh, this is particularly hybrid.
So, I have an opinion about this.
I'm so glad. I knew you would.
Not necessarily about your goal. So there was a other business article at town meeting that indicated a preference for having a hybrid representative town meeting next year.
Yes.
And at the point in time in which the board is considering what should next year's representative town meeting look like,
Mhm.
I'll certainly speak up and share my thoughts. I'd be happy to share them now if it's useful.
I don't think it's appropriate now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There will be those that will want it to be hybrid and those that will want it to be in person. I don't know that there'll be anybody who will voice an opinion in favor of all electronic unless things go really haywire over the course of the year. But that's a decision and a determination that I would suggest is months away.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just remembering that there was some specific reason why hybrid was impractical.
I think there is, but
There
that would be
is.
diving into.
I think that we're getting into kind of discussing the item itself.
I'll move along.
Yeah.
I'm actually glad you brought it up, because when I read hybrid, I was thinking electronic, and I'm glad that I'm reminded, in my personal opinion, the hybrid would be a terrible idea, but we can address that.
And that again gets to addressing the actual item.
Yeah, and just to like really make this clear, it's not appropriate for us to really kind of like remove this right now or to make a determination about it, because we cannot predict the future. And the pandemic has taught us all that making, predictions about where we'll be some number of months from now is kind of silly.
Yeah.
And we don't do the warning for town meeting until January.
End of January.
And even at the end of this January, when we did it, we were kind of looking into the future a little bit and trying to figure out whether, all remote, blah, blah, blah. So let us come back to this in January when we will know some more.
Satisfied?
I am.
Excellent. Okay. And just looking at the public, I don't see any hands up there. Okay. So we move on to governance. Mr. Quip.
Question about number 4. It says, develop other suggested charter changes for review by the Charter Review Commission. Having never experienced a Charter Review Commission, I'm curious about what it means to develop suggested charter changes. Would the select board be proposing charter changes? Would that come from the town manager's office?
So just to read that correctly, it's not charter changes, but charter charges.
Charges.
So
It's supposed to be charges?
Whoa.
I read changes.
So I actually read that as like charges of a committee. So to charge a committee with a
Oh.
responsibility.
Like the guidelines for the commission.
And so, for example, there was some discussion about the steering committee, the RTM steering committee, if that could be something that could be discussed at the Charter Review Commission. And that would be, to me, that's kind of a charge of, and I don't know if that would come from the select board. But that was my interpretation of number 4.
Be curious what everyone else thought.
Yeah.
Well, let's just leave that and so we can all.
All right, we'll mull it over.
Probably need another CH word stuck in the middle of charter and charges, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we like alliterative projects.
That's true.
All right, very good.
Others on governance.
Oh,
I see a highlight there.
oh, it's just a very minor point, but I was on number 6, evaluate non-functioning committees and determine what is necessary to help them become functional, comma, this is my suggestion, or eliminate if not needed.
Oh, yes.
Huzzah.
Which is a charter thing, right?
No.
No.
Committees serve at the
There are-
pleasure of the select.
We're
There are
talking about
some-
town committee.
There are some committees that are in the charter that we could not do that with.
Yes,
But there are some.
Certainly, we wouldn't attack those committees'
We wouldn't have the ability.
goals. That would not be a good, would be illegal as a goal. But I'm just suggesting that there may be, I mean, I actually don't have a committee in mind, so, but I'm just trying to make sure that the public's aware that we should also consider whether a committee is doing
Absolutely.
what it needs to do.
Thoughts on that suggestion?
I'm all for it.
Sweet.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
Great.
I think it's great.
I have a question about another item.
Yes. In governance?
Yes.
Great.
Number 7, discuss path towards reappraisal, establish a clear and transparent process for the town and residents. I just kind of wondered whether like this belonged in governance, whether it should be its own section or should belong someplace else.
Planning and housing?
I don't know if he or she has an opinion on it.
I'm not, yeah, I put it in governance because it's something that you have to do every 10 years and you're required to by the state.
Okay.
So,
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else on?
Yeah.
Yep.
So back to number 4 for a second.
Oh, great.
Back to number 4, because I believe that was what came out of our discussion of, we talked about that policy where Brattleboro would be able to adopt charter changes that have been approved by the legislature and governor in other towns.
That was,
So thinking about if there are any of those charter changes
yeah, maybe I will go
that
back.
should be incorporated
Exactly.
into our charter revision. I think that's what that is.
there was a legislative
That's number 3.
fix
Yeah, so
That's-
yeah.
that failed was excised from the,
Right.
Oh,
It was an
unfortunately,
attempt.
from S-181.
Yeah.
It was excised. Just got the news on that 2 days ago.
Yeah, this happened.
No way you could have known that.
And only because I'm nerdy enough to have watched the VLCT.
you're amazing.
I don't know, just bored. But
But also
so
Patrick pointed
unfortunately, it
out,
doesn't look like in this session, we're going to
Okay.
have that option. Patrick's nodding, so I feel
Yeah.
Yeah, this
You'll-
session, it's a done deal, but there's always next year.
absolutely.
So
Just like baseball.
Don't say Red Sox.
so it seems like maybe number 4 of governance has just kind of, do you have any thought on
I'm gonna
where?
have to go back just
Okay.
to make sure that, that it wasn't, that is exactly the wording that we use.
because
Yeah.
Patrick just suggested that number 3 is what I just
Yeah.
talked about. So,
Because I
Okay.
believe that could have been, I think Bob may have made that recommendation.
Okay.
Again, I'm gonna have to confirm that by looking at my notes.
Okay. Right. Jess?
so I really liked what Kate suggested when she was here in person. The idea, I mean, we have in the next section, view all decisions through an equity lens. I wonder if there is something around the goal of making all decisions in a timely, transparent way with consideration for public input. I mean, that's what we do anyway, but like being explicit about it might.
I just think it needs to be said while we're being scolded.
I'm going to step in here and say that if you're going to start talking about that, it's not really on topic.
Well, no, I'm just saying that contracts are made in executive session.
Absolutely. But I think what the question really before us right now is the suggestion as to whether we kind of want to capture the idea of, which we do with these other things, right? To view all decisions through an equity lens, right? Would we want to incorporate the point of public openness and participation and timely discussion?
I would challenge the board to name a decision that this board made legally that happened in private.
I can't think of a one.
So respectfully, all of our decisions, the decision to contract with Golden Cross was a decision that we made in a public meeting. All of the decisions that we've ever made happen in public. Some discussions happen in executive session because executive session allows for certain types of discussions to occur privately, first of all, but the decision is always made in public. And so I don't see what the issue is here.
Well, then I guess
there is a feeling of a lack of transparency. I understand that, right?
There's a perception.
And I'm not, I can understand where that's coming from.
Can I just submit that I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I absolutely appreciate what Kate stood up and said. However, I think that will come through in our actions versus the words printed on a paper for our own goal.
Agreed.
But that's just my opinion. It's certainly our actions that Kate was speaking to, I think.
So I guess the question I would pose to the board then is, for number one of the diversity, equity, and inclusion item, how would that not also apply with the same logic?
Well, it actually gets the problem of when I consider our goals to be a little bit loosey.
Yes,
it's something that kind of bugs me because I, try to always look at things through an equity lens, and it's to call it a goal, then it feels like we could just we did that, check. It feels a little disingenuous to me.
Yeah,
but no, as a goal. I mean, it's more of a credo. It's more of a, it should be the bar at which we always are trying to meet.
It sounds like we're circling around a mission statement.
Kind of.
That already exists, and it's called, how we conduct ourselves. And we could say under each point that we want to define a transparent, equitable process. But we need to come to a point where we all understand that that's a given. Mm-hmm. And whether it be our charter or at the, some sort of mission statement or whatever, it just seems repetitive to add that to each group.
Yeah, that's a fair, so Jess, you were the one who sort of brought up this as an idea to be included in this section. Heard from the board members. Where are you at?
Where I'm at is I believe that there has been some conflict and trust degradation in our relationship with the public. And I think that's also why we see this view all decisions through an equity lens on the list of goals, is because we were wanting to be even more accountable than just assuming that that's part of our job. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe this fast-paced decision-making, which was totally within our purview, but brought a lot of fear, anxiety, mistrust within our community, that we should just be very explicit about addressing, making sure there is time, transparency, and plenty of public input, because that was a problem. Just like when you are performing poorly at a job and they say, we want you to fix this. You keep that on your list next to your desk or wherever, an inspirational quote about it, whatever. You keep it present to remind yourself that that is where you're going and that is what you're doing. And it not only influences your behavior, but it helps put out an image of, yes, I'm committed to this. So I think it's important.
May I just say?
Yeah.
That there are times when deadlines and accountability and processes do not allow for what one might think would be the fullness of time.
So I'm hearing a pretty no on that side. And Daniel, your original comment sort of made me think that you were a no on including this, but I'm not clear now. Or is it continue to be? I haven't heard back from you.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from. I don't believe it's something we need to add to our select board goals.
Okay. But thank you very much for the, yeah, it doesn't even need to be discussed further. Okay. Anything else on DEI? Looking at the public, see.
Oh, we sort of did number 3.
Yeah, we had that conversation last time as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What?
Number 3 has been accomplished.
What?
And it's regular. We're regularly given.
Oh,
Yeah.
So keep it up, Sally. Thank you.
Yes.
Take it off. It'll just be one of those. Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to take it off?
I would say we take it off.
Because it's part of the process now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So community safety.
It's kind of a question, actually. So the first one says, continue to evaluate recommendations from the community safety review. And I want to know what the process is around evaluation. And I'm also curious about the process around implementation. Last we heard from this, all of this work, is kind of sitting with the town manager's office. And we had check-ins last year at a couple of points during the year. I see in point number 2 that we'll do another couple of check-ins in July and December. But how, this does come back to transparency and accountability and public trust. Like, how are things being evaluated? What are the mechanisms for evaluation on those criteria?
I am of the understanding that the police chief and the town manager are diligently working on the spreadsheet. And that's not the case.
Yes, we have.
It should be.
Yes.
And I would imagine that point number 3 would be similar to point number 1 under COVID, in that, the transparency and the equity and the accessible and the blah, blah, blah are all accounted for within the process that we have called select board meetings.
I want to bring in so you described it as a spreadsheet. This was a sort of a matrix document that took each recommendation and determined whether the town could act unilaterally or not. And then there were a couple of spaces where our previous town manager described like what is going on with that. And I would like to bring that document back into play whenever we are evaluating this.
I think that's crucial.
Yeah.
And I think,
and if that document isn't being used right now, I would like for that to come back.
I was just going to say, I think number 3 is trying to speak more to the process of allocation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is an important thing to hang on to because
Yes.
we haven't really defined
No.
how we're going to evaluate. Although I do know there's some early discussions and different groups that have ideas.
Right. But we haven't.
We haven't, so we need to do that.
And I think another factor in this evaluation process, and I know other people in the community have talked about it, is entities outside of the municipality have a role in decision-making. We've talked about the fact that it may be private. But I think that, a discussion with our legislators might also be welcome.
So I'm hearing a lot of, talking around this, but do we feel that number 1 isn't sufficiently defined to incorporate these points about like the matrix? And would you like to make it more specific?
I would like to specifically add starting from the matrix from last year's work.
Yeah. And if we could attach a date to that, to the date of the matrix.
December 17th, something like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then I have one more thing for this section.
Oh, great. I'm just going to see if there's anybody else. Nobody? Okay. Yeah.
Number 4.
4. Oh, a new one. Great.
One.
Yeah.
Just want to kind of point out that this is absolutely a community safety item, and it's evaluate the feasibility of municipal fire EMS and consider ARPA investments in that service if deemed feasible.
Do you repeat?
Yes. Evaluate the feasibility of municipal fire EMS. I know that we're going to do this. I just want it to be like.
No, I was just wondering when we were going to put it in, like which section we're going to put it in.
One.
Yes.
Yeah. And consider ARPA investments in it if deemed feasible. Emphasis on consider.
It's a perfect place to put it. I'm not sure about mentioning ARPA because we've already mentioned ARPA in the other section of ARPA, but
consider all funding sources available, something like that.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you because we're so deep still stewing in that whole thing that we didn't even occur to us that it should go in the goals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And that's the perfect place for
It is the perfect place. Well done. Do we feel good with the language proposed by Mr. Quip?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
There was something of interest that Kate brought up that I wanted to bring back to this conversation, which was not just evaluating the feasibility, but the performance of the program. Which, since we will be getting monthly reports from them.
I think
Can we get a read back of what Daniel proposed again?
Evaluate the feasibility of joint fire EMS and consider funding sources.
Okay.
because we wouldn't be there until the year has gone by. So I think we couldn't, what was your word that you had? Because he said feasibility. Performance of such it's more of a growth year towards that goal.
Right.
So it's not yet performing in its full capacity, assumedly. So
yes, please.
I think what I heard Jessica saying and what Kate mentioned is really wanting to be kind of kept in the loop about how things are going with our new EMS provider. Well, and
so it's
and I
more
don't
of a
know
status than a performance evaluation.
Yeah. Right. And I don't know how doable that is.
Why don't we check with the Yoshi and he can talk to staff about what he thinks might be good language for checking in.
Yeah, I think it's actually very appropriate to go in community safety section, something that speaks to sort of like, you know, we have a new contract this year with a very important service, and we want to ensure that we're keeping tabs, and also that the community is keeping informed on how that's going. And, you know, remembering, I had to remind myself too that goals that are very this year specific are also okay to have because this is for this year, and so if we contract again with Golden Cross next year or we don't, or, there's something else, like it's okay for it to be in this year's goals. So. Yeah.
And we do check in on the goals.
Exactly.
Right? Quarterly.
Quarterly.
Yeah.
We might have the first draft finished by the end of the first quarter. Just about.
Oh, no.
Okay, I think that's So I actually think then there should be a fourth and a fifth item in community safety. Did I hear that correctly?
You tell me what those
Fourth
fourth.
is-
The fourth item should be about municipal fire. The evaluation of feasibility of municipal fire, and the fifth one should be more about this year's contract and the keeping that process in a surface way as we continue. That kind of
Transparent and accessible.
yes.
We need to define a transparent, accessible, and accountable. We keep missing this word accountable.
Accountability. It's an important element. Yeah.
If we put it on the list, we will be accountable to it.
Cool. Okay. Anything else? Anything on public? Okay. Planning and housing.
I didn't have any
I
notes.
have no comment.
This one I was good with.
Didn't write any notes here.
Jess?
I'm good.
Bam. All right. So do we just fix the housing problem?
I just want to make sure.
Oh, wait.
that number 5 just to go back 2 seconds.
Yes, back to
I just wanna
5.
make sure that I got the number 5 that correct.
Yes.
Provide routine updates on the progress of fire EMS evaluation or the evaluation of the fire EMS.
I think 5 spoke more to the transitional.
Oh, more
The
transition.
EMS services.
The transitional EMS
Oh,
services.
EMS services in general. Okay.
How this year is going at various intervals.
Yeah.
Routine updates on progress of.
Yeah. It's a new
Well,
contract.
also-
It's a different system, hybrid
EMS,
system.
okay.
Yeah.
EMS.
It'll be nice to give us a baseline too for moving forward when
Sure.
we do it.
Yeah.
Based on progress.
Absolutely. Thank you for checking in on the clarity.
Oh, I did.
Do you have something on housing?
I was wondering if number 2, are we going to create a housing, an implementation plan based on, is that?
No.
Okay. I
I
just
hope not.
I think,
wanted to check in on, is that our goal?
let's bounce that to Yoshi.
Which one?
Number 2 on planning and housing, create an implementation plan based on the recommendations from the Housing Action Plan.
Planning would be work.
Okay, we will
So-
approve it
so that'd probably
or?
be-
We'll evaluate what they suggest.
We did approve the action plan, correct?
We approved the
Approved.
plan.
And now we need
and
an
now Sue
implementation
will come
plan.
up with items.
Yeah.
How do we get the 500? Yeah.
How about there?
We're gonna
Okay.
have one of those giant thermometers in the red.
Yeah.
Yes. Please.
We didn't lift a finger and we got 12 just the other
There
day.
you
Yeah.
Doesn't count yet.
Not yet.
All right. Moving on to climate and sustainability. Liz. Oh, actually, Liz, you've had the first many
Okay.
times.
ahead.
Tim.
Okay, so I'm going to convert my flippant comment on my note.
Oh.
So provide concrete actions for Brattleboro residents to take in their own lives to further sustainability. This gets my sort of libertarian left leg twitching because I'm not sure how that's our job as a Brattleboro Select Board. Much as I encourage, in my personal life, everyone taking responsibility for their own lives and sustainability.
My
I
point-
don't know how that's a goal.
My point when
Or how to measure it.
when I made that last time.
This was yours.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That was
You're sitting right next to me.
That's the idea, not the person.
Who could have ever come up with
Let me just
I thought it came
explain
from
my
that
point.
side of the room.
It's a little nuance. I don't think it's quite captured here, but the sustainability coordinator, I would thought he has kind of a dual role. And one is inward facing from within the staff, but I think there's another role that's kind of outward facing towards the community. And I don't think that we've heard enough of outward facing measures that could be suggestions, certainly not dictating anything to anyone, but just like, these are things that are happening that you might want to, like no mo may.
Mm-hmm.
What?
No mo may.
Done. I have not mowed as of yet.
No, May. Really? That's a thing.
That's a thing.
That's the thing.
Oh, for the
Not to be
wildflowers
confused
and
with no
such?
more May.
And the
Oh.
bugs and the
I don't like to mow until September myself.
Think Daniel want to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that Liz's point gets to some of the occasional confusion about whose goals are these, right? So like, I mean, I guess it's a select board goal, but we're not going to do the work, right? We're saying,
That's a given.
right?
Why is that our
Right? And like, let's be honest about this, right? So what we're really saying is we're letting Yoshi know that this is really important to us, and we're asking Yoshi to say to sustainability coordinator Stephen, would you mind doing some of this kind of work? I also know that the Energy Committee in the past has done some of that kind of work as well. Yeah, I don't know, like.
Figure out how to make it work.
Is it a select board goal?
I have a different take on
Maybe a select board priority.
It's so like if we take one step back and so we make policy decisions. So is a policy of the town of Brattleboro, big T town of Brattleboro, to encourage the residents of the little T town of Brattleboro to be more sustainable in their lives, I guess is like kind of how I would boil down. I think that is a reasonable question as to whether that is a policy goal that we could set. So the question of like, is this even our job? I think it is. It could be, but it's more of whether we want it to be or not.
That's interesting because it reminds me of the fossil fuel, whatever that is, fund. And
5 Fs.
And the precursor to that was when we did to a certain extent buy the cow power. And one of the purposes of the request to buy cow power was to serve as an example to the community. So that's an instance of your policy recommendation that you just made. And so I agree with you, we should be revisiting whether or not we all think that that's our job.
Yeah. And I think that this is the moment where we decide whether we want it to be part of our policy or not. So
you could just file it under Tim's grumpy comment.
Tim's grumpy comment,
Because
unless
it's not
we have
something
other
that
agreement on the grumpy
that
comment.
I want to die on.
Okay.
No. And I do appreciate the explanation.
No, but I think that it can be a great project for the sustainability coordinator who does work across lots of departments that could all play a little role in whatever this is.
Okay.
A little role in whatever this is.
Some good quotes. Good quotes coming out of this meeting tonight. Okay.
Yay,
It reminds me a
collaboration.
little bit of a
Yay,
community
climate.
suggestion that we tell people to wear long johns in the winter.
What?
what it
I
reminds me
remember
of.
that.
So
Okay. So other items on climate and sustainability?
moving on.
And I'm not seeing anything from the public.
I just would say that number 5 is not a huge priority for me.
Oh, that was mine.
I know.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I think it's really important.
That
I
we
think it's-
share.
Yeah,
Share and
because,
brag and promote Brattleboro. Yeah.
well, no, because sharing also is learning. And I would like, it's
No,
that
I think
sharing is
that our
caring.
sustainability coordinator, correct me if I'm wrong, Yoshi, does a tremendous amount of this already. Like this is
Yes.
like done.
It seems to me, okay, do we think it's done and so it should be removed? I think it's something to be continued to keep working towards.
You know,
But
I think
I'm also willing to, I can,
I think that number 1 and number 5 are kind of 2 peas in a pod. And I think the rest of the 4th would like to jettison the 2 of them.
I say
That's funny
we
because
move
when
on.
Okay, well,
But that's not for me to say.
no, yes.
When I read 5, it's different. It lands with me differently because I think of the compost program, which is something that is a model and looked up to and was a wonderful thing and a real thing that we did. Whereas,
And the bags and so forth.
telling people to change their lives to further sustainability has no real definition in my brain.
I have one thought on maybe.
You are telling people to compost, you're telling people not to use plastic bags.
Well, our compost system was a reaction to the state's mandate to deal with this stuff. And it was a very good program that we implemented to solve not only, sustainability, but a state mandate. So I'm especially proud of something that's a policy decision that is then a model for the
I
rest
see.
of the state.
Yeah, I think to not go too far down the road there, as I look at the time, I think the one thought I would have just to change 5 would be to like not just sharing, but communicating with other communities and learning from them. I guess like the back and forth is like the element that I was also considering when I suggested this. And I don't know if that's captured in the language of 5 or not, but I imagine, as Liz has said, that that's actually already being done anyways. So
am I keeping it in?
I think, I don't know. Are we okay with keeping it in? Yes, Liz is okay. I'd like to keep it in. Danny. All right. Yes, we're keeping it in. All right. Traffic, pedestrian safety, and infrastructure.
Question.
Yes.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Have 0 pedestrian and bicycle fatalities.
You said
That was something I said. It is a goal. Like, if your goal is to have 0 fatalities, that is great. And it is laudable and it is important. And also, what happens when, I wish this was funny.
That's true. It's not.
What happens to us as a policy setting body when we fail to meet that goal in Q1?
I do think you make a good point, because I think you brought this up to me when you talked about it, and that, that is a goal.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think it absolutely right. You see any workplace, they have the goal of 0 workplace incidents.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely, and that drives policy as not only from the department and the way we look at decision making. So I think that absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, so I'm no longer on the traffic safety committee. I've passed the baton to Liz. And, one of the things that committee routinely does is get a report from the police department about incidents, involving pedestrians and bicycles, and whether they led to injuries or, God forbid, fatalities. And so reporting back from that committee to us so that we know what's happening, and are using that information to make our streets safer. So it's, I hope that we will meet the goal of 0 fatalities. I'm also realistic, knowing that, that may well not be the case. And I want us, when we learn that information, to act upon it.
Liz.
I would just suggest that instead of have, we should say work towards. And I will mention that I am happy to be on the committee. And I also just watched a webinar for my planning credentials on this very subject. And there's a lot of interesting things to do. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Yeah.
So we okay with work towards 0 pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. And I think it's great, Daniel, that putting it here forces us to confront it if, heaven forbid, that is the case, that we fail to meet this. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on traffic, pedestrian safety? No. Great. Moving on to utilities.
None.
Wow. Yeah.
Approve of all 3.
Approve of all 3? Approve of all 3?
very exciting.
Excellent. Nothing else in the public queue. All right. Public outreach.
Look at that.
Crickets
There's
also?
some accessibility and transparency in there. Look at that. I mean, engagement.
I would say
Have an accountable town website.
4 was contentious. I had this in my notes. in our,
Yes.
so I'd like to confirm before we pass this along for final approval that language is good with the board.
And we're not necessarily approving a plan for outreach. We're just discussing it.
Correct, and it could lead to a plan for outreach.
It could,
Absolutely could.
subject to select board.
Approval. Yes. Good. All right. Great. So then moving on to cannabis. Yoshi, do you want to just speak to the?
Oh, because you've accomplished that already.
Excellent.
Because
I just
you
wanted to
participate in the development of state regulations.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Check.
Good job, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Sort of.
As
Yes.
much as they're allowed.
I
And he
just
still wants to run for the legislature.
Yeah.
Amazing.
number one, create a local cannabis control board, right? I mean, I know that that's the assumption, but just be explicit.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it's
I'm gonna.
commission.
It's a commission?
Well,
I know. I think it's a cannabis control. It's a CCC.
whatever you do, do not call it a CCB because that confuses with the state cannabis control.
Oh, so it's a commission? I'll confirm what the language is.
Right.
Brattleboro Cannabis
Become
Control Board.
commissioners.
That's a
Then-
BCCB.
So it'd be the CC cannabis.
I'll just
control.
check.
I can
with Bob.
confirm.
Oh, you
That
can-
would be
please?
CCC.
CCC. I had one thought on this, which was just that we don't actually have to have one. So the language, in my opinion, probably should be not just create, but like consider/create, because it's not necessary.
Okay.
Consider
seems
the
to-
creation of.
Consider the creation, because saying just create assumes that we've
That
taken
decision
one
has
step
already
and it has
been
not been made.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not speaking to whether we should or shouldn't, just that.
Okay.
I have an email here from the League of Cities and Towns that calls it a local cannabis control commission.
So it's
There it
okay.
is. The CCC.
Thanks for looking.
Welcome.
Great. Finally, recreation and parks. So this was added in its entirety.
Yeah.
Great.
This is a ringer because this is obviously something that
I mean, we already sort of heard about this
Yes.
several months back.
It's gonna be able to go.
I noticed that there isn't a item to build a year-round swimming pool memorial park.
I do notice that that's
I don't
not in
believe
here.
My fellow board members are in favor of it at this time.
An enclosed pool.
Yes.
There are community members that are very interested. In
Yes, I am one of
discussing.
them.
I think that is captured in other areas.
I think, yes,
Yes.
we'll get to that conversation one day.
Or maybe not.
I mean, look, it's not,
Well,
there are lots
creating
of,
a plan for
also like a monorail and, whatnot.
I saw that Simpsons episode.
I know.
Yeah, generational. Yeah, I kind of agree with Tim. I don't think that one's bullet points are exclusive.
Including but not limited to.
I mean, I would probably make that change, but we don't have to get that nitpicky.
And this is just as we create the budget for next year. This is going to be in consideration for how we.
Yes, and we can give updates on how we're looking at funding.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, now that we've kind of gone through the full thing, in our time in reflecting on the goals in the discussion from last time, are there any additional goals or categories that any board member feels should be incorporated in our 2022-23 select board goals? Excellent.
Is have fun in there?
No.
No. Okay.
Okay.
But as a town policy,
Yeah. Yes.
It's a mandate.
Since we have some changes, can we put this in the consent agenda?
Yes. That's what I was going to say.
Lovely.
Next meeting.
Yes. So I think,
Fully review.
yeah, considering we made some substantive changes, it makes sense to do that. So I think in that case, we don't have a motion. So we'll just look for kind of a final for 2 weeks from now. So moving on to new business.
I'm very patient.
Yes. So if you want to come up and use the table there, Steve. And Sue.
Double trouble.
Sorry, we're split screening you tonight. I apologize.
Yeah, we're gonna ping pong.
No worries. So I'm not sure who's gonna start this off. Sue.
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce you, Steve Hayes. He's the planning tech. He's been with us just under a year. And Steve has done the bulk of the work on this, so he will be presenting and we're both here to answer questions. So go ahead, Steve.
Nice to meet you all finally in person.
Yeah, welcome.
So the planning department was tasked with developing a more permanent program for regulating parklets in the public right of way. And to do that, we reviewed a number of existing programs around North America. What potential best practices could be easily and quickly adopted. And what we found is a general lack of success in most of the common policies in what is still a developing. We found that they tended to have a considerable amount of cost and regulatory barrier to applicants. It didn't seem to be in proportion with the actual potential impact of a parklet, and oftentimes did not have the impact of providing for a well-regulated, aesthetically pleasing public realm, as was the stated goal of the program. So we've developed a set of alternative policy proposals that are not completely unprecedented, but are certainly less common. Examples of these policies being implemented in other communities that are located in the appendices of the memo that was provided. For further reference. What we are looking for is feedback and potentially for these alternative programs to be developed into implementable design or implementable regulatory language for our program. So there's three major topics that we've policy that fairly innovative, we think. That would be in the field of design, location requirements, and in pricing. And so for the design requirements, we're proposing that the town develop a pre-approved model parklet that is safety tested and ensured to be ADA compliant and low materials costs. Whoever is the town body that is able to take that work on. We would then be able to rent these parklets out to the public and avoid having to ask the public to become experts in a field that is likely outside their general knowledge. For a much quicker review process, as we know that this was a ADA compliant, safe, and aesthetically pleasing design that we could be proud of. We could still allow for the public to decorate and furnish these parklets so they would be able to have that sense of individuality.
Can you speak up a little?
Oh, sure. So we would be able to allow the public to design, paint, furnish, provide public art in these in a non-structural capacity. And that would allow for individualization of those parklets. And so in terms of the location of the proposed parklets, we're proposing to have planning staff develop an official map of the places in downtown that are feasible by their physical site characteristics, like how the slope of the road determines whether or not a parklet could be placed there, as well as some infrastructural components that would limit the capacity for a parklet, like a loading zone, bus pull off, as well as soliciting input from other department heads to make sure that we've accommodated their needs for the public realm. And by providing that map ahead of time, we would be reducing the applicants' required work. We would be, again, asking them not to have to become an expert in something that is outside of their general expertise. And we would reduce the redundancy in accept a lot of site plans when we could simply provide that map ahead of time and be able to near instantly approve a pre-approved location. In terms of the pricing, there is very little consistency in existing programs nationwide in what practices tend to be adopted. So what we're proposing to do for pricing is to consider these three alternatives for the monthly rate that we would be charging for each of these or for each parklet. And so essentially what the right choice for Brattleboro is comes down to a decision based on our values. The first option is essentially to just charge what is the identical rate of our average on-street meter space, as if to presume that a car using that space every billable hour over the year average month would come out to about $220. So if our values determine that that is the fair rate to charge them for that use of the public space, then that is certainly a guarantee to recoup more revenue for that space than recoup from its average parking use. But I do believe that this would probably have a deterring effect on the interest in parklets, and it may well be totally out of touch with what the potential market for these parklets would be. So I wouldn't particularly recommend that, but I do see the potential value in terms of fairness that I know the public might feel. The second option is essentially break even, and it would be charging based on the observed occupancy rate of an average meter. And so based on our 2018 parking study, that would come out to roughly 150 per month per space. And this is pretty much in line with most current pricing models. There are some communities that charge substantially more, but I don't think that we should be doing that. The third alternative is to not use either of those structures to base our decision on and charge less than a break-even amount if we are concerned with wanting to potentially promote the use of parklets over the use of parking as a repurposing of parts of our public realm. So based on what the Selectboard in terms of our budget and what potentially the public feels is fair, would be the right move to choose in terms of our parking or our pricing model. But each one of these should be a feasible, potentially acceptable. So I think some stakeholder interviews of local businesses to determine what they would be willing to do. So create some certainty in that realm. But I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Please.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. I think it was really innovative, and you really did a lot of research. Yeah, as you said, North America on what the various options for our town to do. And I really like how you broke it down by value, by our values, which was really helpful. I just have a couple of questions. Are there problems with the existing parklets that our goal is to correct?
So I suppose it would depend on who you ask if there are problems. I think certainly you could consider the aesthetics of Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, other than
Street.
like, are there safety issues? Are there other concerns like that?
I've certainly heard some discussion of those being potential concerns. I don't think that necessarily this program would be any more or less capable of protecting public safety outside of obviously, impact from cars. I think that would be something that we could ask of the applicants to sign a maintenance agreement to make sure that they are actually actively taking care of their space and, investing in the responsibility that it should bring to them.
And is there interest?
I believe that there is interest. I think likely if we were to have a very certain and reasonable cost model that doesn't take very long to review and approve or deny, that would probably reduce a lot of the most businesses likely feel with the more conventional programs, and there may well be more interest than we might expect. But if there's not a substantial amount of interest, then I think at least in the first two pricing schemes, this should be able to essentially pay for itself after materials cost within 1 year, if even two were awarded. And so we would also be in control of the cap effectively on how many units we're going to provide, as opposed to having to determine how many is appropriate and when to cut that off.
Great. So I have one more question. As you may know, economic development money paid for the New Jersey barriers. And so we have them now and paid a considerable amount of money for them, I believe. And so I love the idea of you streamlining the process to make these prototypes or units of parklets. But I wondered, who do you anticipate to bear the cost for that? And would that again be something that we could determine would be an economic development funding?
So, yeah, I'll say first and foremost that I don't want to assume necessarily what the potential strings attached to. That's a bit out of my expertise, but I would imagine so. I think the amount of Jersey barriers that I've seen us implement in the public realm is likely not enough to supply more than. I think the aesthetic being able to ensure that I definitely think I would imagine it would be quite popular to see a more aesthetically pleasing design implemented. And I believe we could, try to repurpose Jersey barriers as
I'm just using the Jersey barrier as an example of something that was paid for with the purpose of economic development funding, from program income. But I just think that the decision as to what we're going to pay for, what we're going to bill for each of these things kind of depends on who bears the upfront cost. And I think that a decision could be made. I don't know what your thoughts were about who would be paying these upfront costs in the town, or what budgetary item that would be. But one suggestion would be to use program income, and then that would pass along to the business. And who would actually build these prototypes?
Right. Yeah, certainly we didn't want to be volunteering any other department. The planning department. But I think some of the things we had discussed were potentially, asking to see if any departments felt that was something they'd be willing to take on. But if not, or in addition to that, also seeing if a local trade school or work program might have folks who would want to do some of that
We have one of those. Yeah. Very much, Steve.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? I think that we were envisioning that the upfront cost would be borne by the town. Depending how quickly we could move something forward, there's some grants that we could look into. We may have missed some of the deadlines, but AARP has grants, and the Department of Housing and Community Development program has some better, I can't remember exactly the name of the grant program. I know we've missed it for this year, but there's a little crowd funding that goes along with it. So we do think that there could be some sources of funding out there, and then, potentially program income or ARPA, or, if it's low enough, it maybe could even come from some line item in a department budget. But we were thinking the upfront cost would be from the town. And then as to your question about interest, we do know that the two businesses that have had parklets, both Hermit Thrush, they seem to want to maintain their parklet, and I've heard Elliott Street Fish and Chips is eager to, they may be interested as well. So we think that there's at least two, but we haven't really done that outreach. We could work with DBA to kind of figure out who might be of interest. And of course, if they're paying for the space, that might change their calculation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And Steve, thank you for your presentation. I think I just wanted to frame this a little bit for the board, because in this really great detailed memorandum, we don't have a recommendation for the board tonight. And so I sort of see this conversation as reviewing what's been presented to us, and if we have sort of opinions on options here, but then also if there are things that either board members have individually or I've heard from the public about the parklet program that we've had that we want to have addressed in a actual policy that would be proposed to the board, then we would want to ensure that we've voiced that tonight so that that can be considered by planning. Is that a fair kind of thought process there, Sue?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So I've got a couple of thoughts, but I wanted to open it up to the other. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for the report. It actually was great. I read the whole thing, and I love talking about parking. Actually,
great thing.
Because this idea of public space versus, private use is a really important one. And I like to take an even bigger picture and just look at the overall, benefits to the community, not just about the money of spaces, parking revenue lost. So I just wanted to say that the pre-approved, pre-made idea is an excellent one.
Yeah.
The map is, I think, not only excellent, but essential, because we learned a lot during COVID, and we learned how many spaces are really not good for doing it.
Yeah.
And certainly a lot about people just weren't as interested as we thought they might be. And some of that might be aesthetics. And so I'm pretty excited to implement something that's a little more aesthetically pleasing.
Yes.
On the pricing, I'm actually feeling like, you give us the options of maximum revenue, observe meter. I'm actually landing below this, because when you come to a parking space and someone has come to town and they want to visit Brattleboro, if they can't park one place, they're more than likely going to park in a different place. So you're not really looking at a loss of revenue in that case. So I know you're amused because you're surprised that I am advocating for an even lower price point. But I think for the success of the program, if we were going to, make it an introductory thing, it should be like at least 100 per space or lower, because the lower offer here was 150, but that's based on observed meter rates of on-street parking. And honestly, if you don't get a spot in front of Sam's and you want it, you park a little up the hill and you walk down, hopefully, if you're able, So Actually, there's no parking in front of.
I was going to say, you can't really park in front of
Terrible
them. You can double
example.
park there, but it's really problematic for the.
Do
you live in town?
The other side of the street.
At home, so anyway. So anyway, my point being that I think I'd be a little bit more generous on trying to encourage people to take advantage of the program and not look at the space as like a moneymaker, because there are other spaces to make money with.
Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do agree with you. You know, my understanding of the original Parklet program was that we did not charge them any money for it, and it still wasn't massively oversubscribed. So I don't think that the money is the issue. I mean, it was well used by 2 businesses, but quite quickly, the others that tried it didn't really, like it. It was also a really different stage in the pandemic, right? So many of those were restaurants that like ended up, really kind of being shuttered for a while. And I don't know. I think the aesthetics of the Jersey barrier is not great. Those businesses that did use them have made them look as attractive as a Jersey barrier can. I am in favor of something more aesthetically pleasing. I would like to see what the design looks like. I'd like to see some mock-ups, and I'd like to see prices on them just to know, like, what does it cost to make this? And like, I guess that cost should include like staff time. If we're saying that some unnamed department or staff members will be building these things. I know that DPW helped rebuild the current bike parklet that's outside People's Bank a couple of years back. And so maybe they've got some skills, but not volunteering them. And I'm curious about, well, actually, no, I'm not, because we're not going to worry too much about money, which is odd. And so actually, that is the sum total of my comments and
initial comments.
Yeah.
You have thoughts? Or?
I've got some thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm super excited about this too. One of the questions I have is around allowed uses for these parklets. Right. So, we talked a little bit about some of the businesses that are already there, adjacent like commercial businesses. But then we have the bike parklet where folks can park their bikes. And I think that's community sponsored. So I would love to see this framed as something that could be used for community uses, for downtown businesses to use, or for businesses that are not downtown to potentially use as well. For example, I would love to see a parklet be a busking stage for an artist.
Right. Can I also build on what Jessica's saying? Like,
yes.
It's not only about providing a business that is, say, a cafe with extra cafe seating for paying customers. It's also about enhancing our downtown, like, livability, right? We do not actually have that many places that are comfortable to sit downtown. And if we could turn a parklet into a nice spot to sit in that didn't involve the exchange of cash for any services, I'd be more than happy with that.
Do you have more, Jess?
I do.
Yes. Okay.
And I love the idea of building our own. I love Daniel's comments about seeing some examples. Also, the idea of maybe providing plans if there is a enterprising person who would want a more permanent structure for a long-term parklet. But also with the map, exploring the idea that maybe it doesn't have to be a downtown thing. I think you mentioned in the memo, like possibilities of West Brattleboro or other areas. Is it possible to have it in a parking spot that's not metered? Is it possible to have it in an area where people park, but is not specifically designated for parking? And what would we have to navigate to make that possible, probable, or is it too complicated for now? Is that a question? I don't know. Yeah, something to think about. Yeah, those were the things.
So that's excellent. I really appreciate those points, and you actually checked off a couple for me. I think one that I really want to touch on that I think needs to be an element of a policy that the board were to adopt when it concerns parklets is if you're a business, where can you actually put it? Does it have to be right in front of your business? Can it be off the side? Can it be in front of another business? That then really starts to go into a question of if we're going to have this used as something other than a cafe putting out more space, but it could be used for someone else. Where could they put those? Could they put them in front of businesses? Which businesses could they put them in front of? We had some community outreach very specifically about this. So I really want to ensure that whatever policy if we're really looking to make this long-term, that we can use, these issues need to be fully articulated in the policy so that businesses know what they're getting into, and other businesses who may not want a parklet, but know that other people around them may want them, understand it as well. So that, and then I think the other one is, so we had two businesses that use the parklet pretty successfully. So I think some outreach to them about how it worked, how successful it was, and that was already spoken to. But the other element of outreach that I would really like for this is there are a couple of businesses who tried it and it didn't work. And I'd really like to hear from them if it was simply the location, if there were other elements of the parklet system that could have been addressed. Because we pushed out really fast, and we were trying to just address an issue and a need as quickly as possible. And so with a little bit more time, we can maybe answer some of those questions, and maybe we can raise the interest level of those businesses that maybe didn't like it the first time around. Those are the ones I've got right now. Yes.
I want to win the prize and tie this to our goals.
Oh boy.
I think that our crack planning staff could also tie their continuing research to the downtown master plan and that park linkage plan that exists.
What if you had parklets that linked parks?
Well, yeah.
Wow.
What if the parklets were parks?
What if?
I have another
first
thing. So it was a point about private versus public use.
Oh,
Right.
private versus public use of open
Can
space.
someone who lives downtown have a parklet that's their backyard?
No.
And it's just for them. Is that allowed?
Can you see
Right?
Tim just like?
And so how is that different than a business that has a parklet that only allows customers to use it?
Yeah. Can a business say
Right.
who
So
may
where
or
are
may
the
not be in the
lines?
parklet?
I think that's really a critical element of I think it needs to be, if we're making a policy, it's got to have a policy about, because what if you're a business that can't have a parklet because of your location? Can you have a parklet in another location? Like,
I want to be clear that, we would evaluate, we wouldn't allow everyone to have. So if there is no particular use for just because somebody wants one, I'm fairly sure planning and myself and others would recommend that that we not give that one person, the opportunity to just have their own backyard parklet.
It is part of our public streets.
Yeah.
And I think that the usage needs to be linked to that.
Right. So having language or some sort of guidance on how to make that decision would be.
Yeah. Other thoughts from the board? Just going to look to the public and see if anyone's got feelings on it.
It was a very nice and interesting.
Oh, I do see Gary Stroud.
Yeah, Gary.
Planning commission.
Planning commission. Yeah.
In this iteration, perhaps.
I'm slowly coming on, winding in. My camera should be coming up. Ta-da! Well, I was thinking as a great slogan is Brattleboro's the romantic spot with parklets. You're sitting outside in a beautiful moonlit night outside, being serenaded at a beautiful French restaurant. So that's like a dream I was thinking, having those parklets, being from New York, going to Greenwich Village, having people sitting outside in the hustle and bustle at night and that crisp air. It's a warming feeling. And I used to sit outside the fish and chips. And I tell you, what an experience meeting people, you know, outside. I mean, I think we've been in long enough eating. I think we ought to start eating outside now. So that's just my thought, and I highly recommend it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Gary. Anyone else from the public? I'm not seeing any. All right. So does that kind of, have we sort of provided, is there any questions from Sue or Steve on this, on kind of the thoughts from the board here?
I could address a couple briefly of the comments that came up if there's time or interest, or I could respond with a memo in the future, or just promise to take this into account.
I think if you want to just sort of incorporate the, unless do we want to hear from, I don't,
I was just going to poll the board at what, if the general mood was similar to mine concerning pricing, because that felt like
that was the one thing I think that we didn't really get back to, but I really agree. Yeah,
I really think that the economic development benefits of something like this outweigh any pricing.
Yeah. So I guess the only change beyond the additional stuff would be a fourth pricing model or third pricing model where,
what they mentioned,
or maybe it was below cost. Yeah. So a lower than parking rate. So if the board's okay, I think instead of putting you all on the spot now, just having it sort of incorporated.
Right. This is going to come back to us.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we agree with low barrier as far as design review and going with the
Absolutely.
not prefabricated, but pre-planned.
Pre-planned. Yeah. The one thing on the pre-plan that just came to mind is just and I just remember this coming up before, was whether the floor matches the curb's height. And if you can have a pre-plan where the height of the floor is the same, because are the curbs the same for every single one?
Right. I think so.
Are they all the same height exactly?
No, they vary.
Yeah.
I imagine they vary.
Yeah.
Have you parked in front of the hardware store?
Do you live here?
I do live here.
I think the point of the planning, though, is to allow for some of those.
There's the creation of a map which will determine good spaces and would understand how high curbs need to be.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. So not to get more cyclical with it.
Yeah, that would go into the map. The two ways to address the curb height, which does have ADA implications, so we would want to take that very seriously. Pedestals that we could buy, which are adjustable, that's a higher price point. Or we could have dimensional lumber that we sand down so that it matches the cross slope of the road. If there's data on the cross slope of the roads that we could put into GIS, we could pretty much just have an answer for that. But,
wow.
That is definitely something that we could include in mapping, and we could map as much of the town as we think we would want to, I would imagine.
And I don't think it's going to curb anyone's enthusiasm.
On that, Steve, Sue, thank you very much for the presentation. I think with no action needed, it's almost 8:15. So I think it'd be time to take a quick break for our interpreters. So let's reconvene in 10 minutes at 8:23. Great. It is currently 8:24. We are 1 minute behind, but we are going to reconvene the select board meeting now. So we're going to move on to new business item B, which is the Prouty-Delta initiative presentation. So I want to thank the folks who are about to present for their patience as they had to sit through us discuss our goals for a while. But we really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having a PowerPoint from you. So who do we have before us now?
Great. Hi, you have Chloe Leary. I'm the Executive Director of the Winston Prouty Center, and I'm joined by David McManus, who does Planning and Administration for Delta, Vermont.
Excellent.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. And David, let's just get a quick check. Can you just do a quick mic check?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Ian.
Excellent. All right. Thank you both very much. So I understand that you guys have a presentation for us, and maybe Patrick may be using the. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to do it. If I can. Can you everybody see everything?
Yes.
Great. So, and I think you all have a paper copy in your packets, hopefully.
Yes.
So thank you so much for giving us time on your very busy agenda. We really appreciate it. We thought it would just be a good idea to get this project on your radar, do an update, and let you know what we're thinking about, just so as you all do all the work that you're doing around making this town such a wonderful place to live, you'll know sort of where we might plug in or at least have us on your radar. So I'm going to go through presentations quickly as possible, being aware of the time, and then be able to answer some questions if you'd like. So Prouty-Delta Development Initiative is a little bit of an offshoot of us buying the Prouty Center, buying the former Austin School campus. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating what some of you may know, but we bought this campus in 2016, and knowing that we didn't need 180 acres and we didn't need 130,000 square feet of space to take care of, but knowing that this was an incredible asset to the community, it certainly met our needs for expansion, and hoping that we would be able to engage the community to help us figure out what we all could do together to move this property forward and have it be the valuable asset that we know it could be. So in 2019, we pulled together a group of people to do planning. We came up with a plan to help make the campus sustainable and sort of talk about some of these issues. We are implementing that plan even despite COVID, and really trying to stem the losses. We knew that when we bought this property, we would lose money. That was intentional, but we also knew that, again, with help, we could make it work, and we are well on our way to making it work, thanks to the many people who helped us do planning. So as part of that planning process, we connected with Delta Vermont, and some of you may be familiar with sort of the campus that is immediately to our south 130 acres. And, you know, Bob Johnson has owned that property for a long time and had ideas about a better place to live and work. And so he has some priorities that when we looked at them and we talked about what came out of our campus planning that people had described as important, that there was some synergy there. And David, I don't know if you want to add anything about sort of the history of Delta campus and housing, or if you should plow through. You're muted.
Oh, sorry, David has to be unmuted.
Sorry, 1 second. We're having a couple different things. Patrick, David needs to be unmuted to be able to.
Stay unmuted.
I was just saying,
great.
having trouble hearing Chloe.
Okay. Did other board members have issue with Chloe?
It's maybe not super clear, but I could hear it.
Okay.
A little muffled.
So we're having a little bit of audio difficulty with Chloe. So we'll hopefully maybe we can try to address that when you present again. But David, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for having us. And yeah, Chloe is describing how, you know, the relationship started. We're neighbors. We have like priorities and similar goals. Sustainable development, a really nice place to live and work is Bob's inspiration and mission for many years. And so it just made sense to us to keep pursuing this partnership, and we're thrilled and honored to be working with the Prouty folks.
So,
but I could tell you a little bit more about the campus, but again, just to keep things moving, we can answer questions later.
So out of our campus planning, can you hear me better now? I feel like I'm in a commercial.
A little bit. Yeah.
Campus planning really identified priorities around what we want to see happen here. And as David said, it aligns with a lot of what Delta had been looking at. So we created a memorandum of understanding to work together to consider our two campuses as maybe one parcel. And what could we do to leverage the assets together to meet the needs in the community? And as you might guess, even in 2019, when we started this planning, housing was a primary issue that emerged. that we would really need to address as foundational for helping our community become the thriving place we want it to be. People staying here, people working here, people coming here. Housing is the barrier to that. So that really emerged from campus planning, as well as recognizing the need for recreation, indoor and outdoor, places for people to convene. So some of those priorities are the lens through which we are looking as we think about developing this campus more. And so I just want to show you where we are. This is the contiguous acreage. Here's Prouty, here's Delta. You can see that it's in this very interesting spot. And I want to give credit to Chris Campany for identifying that we are sitting between sort of Canal Street, West Brattleboro, and Guilford. And that in terms of, goals of developing sort of not close to what already exists, it offered an interesting opportunity to consider. And so creating a neighborhood is pretty broad. I'd say it's probably like 100,000 foot view, but maybe neighborhoods, but certainly that's sort of our driving vision. So just to outline it and what I just talked about, really thinking about diverse housing opportunities that meet all sorts of needs. It's really important for the housing continuum to be robust. It's not just affordable housing or low income housing. It has to be meeting a lot of different kinds of housing. And our goal for it to be walkable, bikeable, and sustainable in lots of other ways, and encourage development and other sort of that. And this is part of Delta campus's vision also, like Commonwealth moving there, Omega Optical being there. This people need a place to work and live as well. So that combination of goals is sort of in the mix for us. We have an advisory committee for our initiative. Some of really appreciate these folks volunteering their time and helping us think about all the different angles as we try to figure out how to move forward. I feel really lucky to have such great brains on the project. And I suspect we will have many more as the years come, but just a shout out to them, really appreciating that expertise. So we formed the initiative. We are the recipients with the town of Brattleboro. Thank you, town of Brattleboro, for being willing to write a VCDP grant for water sewer infrastructure study. And I think that will probably be coming before you for approval to move that forward so we can understand what kind of infrastructure we need if we're going to build housing here, more housing. And we've submitted grant proposals to the capital investment program, which we didn't receive. Earmark money last year, which we didn't receive, but again this year. So we're just putting out a lot of feelers and requests for money to start getting resources for master planning, thinking about permitting, engineering, sort of some of that foundational work, and even some of the hard costs that are going to be the underlying foundation we need to keep moving forward. And one of the fun things we did, again, Chris Campany suggested a design competition that brought in ideas from students from 2 different programs about what could it look like here. I think we really wanted to have the opportunity to think about what were some of the options and what were people in school thinking about anyway. So I'm just going to show you some of those really quickly because it opened up our eyes a little bit. University of Southern Maine students, really like what kind of different housing options are there? Those of you who have been on the campus know that it's very steep in some places and there's ledge. And so sort of what are some creative ways we might build? What are different options for types of housing? So maybe, apartment buildings and single family homes. And this really, I think, I can't emphasize enough the importance of having all the different options that anybody in our community might want. This has to be an inclusive, reflect our community kind of project because everybody needs housing. And so building out that continuum is really part of what we've been talking about. Here's an example of somebody who took sort of the whole campus. So this is both of our campuses and really showed we could leave a lot of green space and put a road connecting, have some different, over here on the Delta side, maybe this a neighborhood that includes a garden. So just really people thinking broadly about the topography and how it might look if we were to build. Another example of, again, here's the whole parcel. This is a call out of maybe more industrial or commercial side with some housing, parking garage, recreation center. So different ways we can meet needs if we increase how people, the number of people who will be using this land. The idea of pocket neighborhoods has come up. And so this is sort of, I thought, a good example of that again, we talk about creating a neighborhood, but how do we really maybe create lots of neighborhoods? So it was really interesting to get the results of the housing needs assessment and realizing how desperate a situation we are in right now. I think there are a couple of things that have accelerated us wanting to talk about this project more broadly. And certainly the housing needs assessment was one of them. The thought that we need over 500 units of housing to meet need right now it's overwhelming in some ways. And yet, this is the reality. And that doesn't even address, we need people to actually move into the area. Our demographics are aging and our population is declining. Young families aren't coming here. And how are we gonna, we need more than 500 units eventually if we want our community to really thrive. So, I think the pressures of people moving into Vermont because they can work remotely. And, we certainly talked about climate refugees during campus planning. So thinking about, are we going to be ready for this? And it feels so urgent that I think, that again, accelerated our process. And also the availability of infrastructure dollars. So I keep hearing, and I've learned a lot in this process, just to be really clear, I'm not a housing developer. I'm learning a lot about it and hearing, this is like a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity for getting funding to do something like water, sewer infrastructure for a project like this, because it doesn't pencil out for private development necessarily. So I think we have this really interesting combination of land ownership and different interests, nonprofit, business, and how do we bring that all together in a way that will sort of open up our region and help our economy and our community thrive. And housing certainly seems to be of primary importance to unlock some of the other issues that we face too. So just really quickly to show sort of where we are, Delta again has been thinking about this for a long time. So this is the Delta campus now. I mean, Commonwealth is not part of it technically, but it's, it's all right there. And, here's a master plan that they've actually had in place for quite some time. And David, I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit.
Just that first photo is just the phase one. We're finishing up phase one with some building, constructing of some housing this summer, which we've been trying to do for a while, but the stars haven't aligned quite right. But we think that's going to happen this summer, and then we move up to the sort of the right and into the next lots, and that's where we need to start building some infrastructure. The middle part of that, Chloe, are sort of industrial. It's all zoned industrial right now, but we're PUD, so we can do commercial and residential. And the idea is, as you go around the dog leg, it goes up to more of a residential sort of community. And right at that dog leg is kind of where we would meet Prouty with some sort of road system, aside from a trail that we already have.
Great, thank you. So, and this again has been in the works for a while. You're way ahead of us in that sense. So, sort of building on that thinking, thinking about the Prouty campus. So here's an aerial of the Prouty campus, and just to point out, it is 180 acres, but this main part of the campus is about 27 acres. And thinking, it was really fun to look at the student designs and think about the whole, all the acreage, and then when you start to think about what that would cost, you realize that maybe more compact development would be a better road to start thinking about. And so really wanting to think about how to make this feasible and how to, in terms of thinking of phase development in particular. This is not going to happen all at once. And so where can we start to have some success? And because our campus is already tied to sidewalks and water and sewer, it's not, we're not starting from scratch. What if we look more at infill, decrease the cost, maintain green space, and actually help people connect more? So we are I'm going to say this many times, this is just an idea that we want to sort of start putting out there, that yes, we're thinking about lots of land But we're going to start with maybe looking at our main campus. So here we are. For those of you who've been there, this is the tallest building on campus, Holton Hall. This is Thomas Hall, where Winston Prouty is. This is the building with the gym in it. So coming up off of Maple Street. And so we're fortunate to have some help from Mark Westa, who is on our advisory committee, but also in a business as a landscape architect, help us think about, well, what if we start thinking about this campus and maybe Croker Hall doesn't have to be there. And just to reassure everybody, this is a concept. There are tenants in Croker Hall. We're not tearing down the building, but just to open up our imagining and thinking about it. And as we would say, it's a little bit of a stinker of a building. So what if we take it down and think about putting up buildings that look like Holton that might be residential, sort of on the main part of campus? And then what if we added a little more of diverse kinds of housing that could fill out and, again, stay compact and happen in a phased way, again, coming up the driveway, different kinds of housing. It might even be condos and ownership and rental. I want to emphasize again, too, the full spectrum, that continuum is so important for it to be robust. Because if it's not, it's going to bottleneck. So like right now, somebody might be renting an apartment that would actually be ready for their next, their starter home, but there's nothing to buy in Brattleboro. So, really helping fill out the continuum. Maybe putting in a parking garage and having commercial or, other things that happen there as well. So again, we're sort of decreasing traffic on the campus. And then thinking about what the road pattern might look like, and back to the indoor recreational facility. So how do you start to really think of, again, compact development on the 27 acres that we have that's already tied to some of the infrastructure. And it starts to look really possible. I have to say, when I looked at this drawing, I just hadn't thought of it. So it's fun to think about, little tiny houses out in the woods, but really there is a lot we could do right here. So this has really sort of energized our thinking a little bit, like in terms of what's possible now, where do we start? Back to how critical it is to get housing units online. So we're trying to catch up a little bit to Delta and their master planning. We're looking for money for master planning so that we can, really make this concept translate to something that will work. And then just to acknowledge, it doesn't mean that we don't do, development on the rest of the campus necessarily. So if there's the main campus down here, there might be other opportunities. So just keeping it all open and thinking about, again, this is a community asset that we want to use to meet the needs of our community, and how can we do that, and what will that look like? And as David mentioned, really continuing to think about how our campuses connect. And is there a parkway that could come through that has a walking path next to it? And maybe you live on the Prouty campus and you work over here at Delta, and you want to get lunch at the Guilford Country Store and then check on your dog and then get back to work at the hospital maybe. I don't know. There's so many. It's just it's a mile from the top of the hill of Prouty over to the edge to looking at Delta campus. It's not that far. It's really exciting to think about how can this property connect neighborhoods and people and meet some of the needs that we so desperately are trying to address in our community. So really quickly, one of the fun things from the students is that we're not the only people talking about this and doing it. This is an old drive-in movie theater in Colorado. This is a community outside of Atlanta, Georgia, that Alex Wilson pointed us to. You can see sort of different kinds of housing and a wetland that's like dealing with all their wastewater. Very cool. The different ways that people can create landscapes, including, again, thinking about how much ledge is here, how do you work with the landscape? And there's a community in Washington that people have pointed us to. So we're not going to make this up. It's not like we're starting from scratch. There's a lot to do in terms of looking at what people are doing out there and how we can apply it to make it work in our community. So, I think it will be unique because we're Vermont and we like to be unique. But so next steps, the water sewer infrastructure study. I think that might even be coming to you eventually for making sure that we can keep that moving along. Looking at incremental development, understanding we are not going to do this all quickly. But hopefully doing it intentionally within a big plan, researching other projects, talking to people about how they've made it work, and particularly around how are we going to pay for this, right? So this is, I think it's unique. It's not going to be just, housing trust model or tax credit housing, or I think it's going to be a really a creative package, out of the box thinking that's going to get us where we need to go. So trying to talk to a lot of people about what that might look like. Few questions we've gotten as we've talked to people, so I'll just try to anticipate them. We are envisioning hundreds of units of housing between the campuses. Again, I know it's very ambitious and aspirational, but it's possible. Looking at that concept, I do believe it's possible. Delta has, as David mentioned, is already doing housing development, and Prouty, not housing development people, but we are learning and finding partners who will be able to help us with it. And really emphasizing this, whatever happens here should look like our community. Everybody's welcome. It's inclusive. That's one of the foundational values of the Prouty Center. And we have to live those values. And so it's going to be a place that looks like our Brattleboro neighborhoods and looks like and reflects who lives here now and who we anticipate coming. So, and as I've said to several people, it's not like there's going to be like, oh, here's the old people's neighborhood and here's the poor people's neighborhood and here's where the families live. It has to be an integrated, meeting all different kinds of needs. So I think it's really exciting. I think it's hard because funding streams are rigid, and that's why I think we have to get creative, but I do think that that's really important and possible. And again, to be really super aspirational, can we do something in the next couple of years? I hope so. Not all of this, again, trying to do it in an incremental way, but I think if we don't hold out an aspirational goal, we're going to languish. And so I'm happy to do that for us. I'm happy to say, you know what, let's believe that's possible. And it's going to take all of us. This is not, I know it's called Prouty-Delta, but really this has got to be the community figuring out how to come together. We took this project on as to be stewards of the land and the property, and we can't do it alone. So this is really also an invitation of, if you know people or have ideas or, point us in the right direction, because it's pretty exciting and we want to make it work. So this is final vision. I think this is the best view of the Connecticut River Valley, top of the hill. If you haven't been here, please come. But we really hope to create a sustainable place to live, work, and play that includes a diversity of people and contributes to the overall vibrancy of the region by complementing what already exists here in the community. So I'm going to stop there and welcome questions.
Great. Chloe, David, thank you so much for the presentation. Obviously, housing is very much on the mind of the board. And I think it was very appropriate for the board to hear about this exciting future plan. So I've got a couple questions, but I'll open it up to the board if anyone has any questions or comments.
Best wishes.
Liz, best wishes. Great. Tim?
Well, I find this incredibly exciting. I'm really trying to balance my excitement with, knowing that these things take time, and but I'm really excited about the presentation you just made on so many levels. I have one thought that's a little hard to deal with, maybe, and kind of long term, but one that might be helpful. I don't know. We had these materials delivered to us as always at around, I never know where to look because we have two things going on. So I was thinking about this presentation and getting really excited for hearing what you had to say. And then I went out for a break, and two modular, literally log cabins, pre-made, prefabbed log cabins went rolling down High Street. They were like 13 by 25. They had to have the two wide load vehicles with them. And I just thought, maybe something like that as a temporary basis to get you to that 2-year, goal for a temporary, and sort of try out, so to speak, the feasibility of placement and things like that, because you got the water infrastructure to some extent. And so maybe something like that could actually provide some early experiments in rental homes up on that campus, which would be really exciting and, get your feet wet. Just an idea. And I'm sure somebody else has thought of that. And the other one is I really like that you're presenting this as a good mix of needs for the community, and you've pointed to the housing study, which talks about 60% of what we need of that 500 is for incomes under 50,000. I think that must mean total household income, but that does leave 40% for housing that also is needed, which is people that want to spend the money, and makes the puzzle fit together with financing. And in my experience, talking to people one-on-one and online, that's the toughest pill for people to swallow, that the town, I believe, needs to get behind a complex, all-in attitude about building, especially with density when it comes to downtown, but building not only what people think of as affordable housing, but all types of housing to increase our volume of housing stock. So I'm really excited that you're kind of touching upon that came out of the study, and are trying to create mixed communities of all different types of needs. So
thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to jump in and say, in the past 2 weeks, I've started saying, I think we should buy some houses off of Amazon. Like, I'm so, and it's directly related to some of the work we do and some of the families we support who are homeless and living in motels. It feels so urgent. I'm trying to hold that back. So I think I'm glad you mentioned the pine cabins driving down the road, because it certainly has crossed my mind. Like, what can we do in the interim? What creative, without shutting doors to other things? I think that's the challenge a little bit is, what's possible, and to keep working for the long-term vision. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Justin?
This sounds like a really lovely project. I'm really excited about it. I'm glad to see that you've got Sue on your committee there, because I have a feeling we might run into some constraints around zoning up there and what the proper uses for that land is. And it's really great that she's in it up to her neck to be in on those conversations. I'm also excited about how you guys are thinking about a more holistic community, not just housing, but what other amenities or businesses or work opportunities might be up there to enhance the walkability and accessibility of the area. That's really awesome. I also want to say thanks, Tim, for shouting out to those log houses, because I live in a neighborhood that was all built from kit homes from Sears back in the 20s to 50s. So it's a pretty Brattleboro standard to get those, not necessarily prefab, but kit based, and make them unique in our own, like we do in Vermont. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what you can do in the next couple of years. I love the idea of trying something. My grandfather, who is 97, told me about after the war. In Brattleboro, there was a big housing boom. Our neighborhood over by the high school was one of those neighborhoods that popped up pretty quickly. But they'd set up very temporary housing in the ball field, in the Little League field on Oak Grove, where folks were crammed in together, but it was all folks that were both building the resources and the actual physical houses that they would be living in the next couple of years. So it was a really neat story of how, there was this intense communal living effort that happened in a very temporary kind of way that everyone acknowledged, that turned into this beautiful neighborhood. So yeah, it happens. It's great.
It's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the vision. Thanks for the hard work. And, I think imagining new possibilities is really difficult work. And, Chloe kind of talked about looking at the Prouty campus and not even imagining what that could look like. And I've been up there a bunch of times, and yeah, that's the first time seeing, those images where I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that totally does seem doable to this layperson. And so, like, you know, I hope that we can continue checking in about this project, and where appropriate, I hope we can support you.
Thank you.
Great. Yep. And I would just say, I echo all of that. I look forward to the next sort of update coming to us. And my question would just be, if there are community members who are interested in getting engaged in this, what's the best way for them to contact you? And are there any events coming up in the near future that they should be looking to attend if they're really interested in what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anybody can contact me or David, and actually a lot of people in the community have, because they read the articles in the Reformer and they're like, what about us? Or we have an idea. And so that's been really great. So, you know, very accessible and open to being contacted directly. So our plan right now is to, again, talk more broadly about this. So we had a tenant presentation. We felt like we needed to come talk to you all, because this is the community and this is, you know, a really sort of that next layer. And then we want to get out to a more statewide audience. So a couple presentations to entities at the state level who might be aware of resources, financial or otherwise, that might help us sort of get to these next phases we're looking for. So, you know, ACCD, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, or VHCB, the Housing Conservation Board. So, and then I think we want to turn back to the community and have ideas. The advisory committee has talked about sort of educational and input, you know, come walk around the campus. Like, I don't know if people know that they can just come walk around. It's open to the public. Come walk on the trails. They're great. And so I think getting people up here and then having opportunities to just, you know, learn about it and hear about what's happening is definitely on the radar. Sort of pop-up events, I guess is what I'm saying. The idea of, like, you know, keep an eye out, and we definitely plan to have, you know, it's hard when you get into something, you get all excited about it, and then you get 20 miles ahead, and I'd rather not backtrack. I'd rather bring everybody along with the process. So yeah, we hope to be doing more of that. There's opportunities to help us. I guess I want to say again, I appreciate the best wishes. And what I really want is, if you do have ideas, or if you do have energy, or if you know somebody who knows something, like, every little bit matters. A staff person, we presented this at March staff meeting, and somebody raised their hand. I was like, did you see this presentation on 60 Minutes about this company, this organization that did this work in Africa? Super inspiring video. Reached out to the company. You know, we met with them. Like, you never know what's gonna catch. So no information is too small. So just plant the seed, and please let us know if you know of resources or people, or think who it might be good for us to talk to. Okay, I'll stop. Sorry, I get all excited.
No, thank you so much. And Patrick, I'm just going to look to you really quickly to make sure there isn't anybody from the public. I don't see anyone. No. Okay, great. Well, I think with that, thank you again so much, both for your presentation. And I think we'll move on to the next agenda item. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Also housing related.
Also housing related.
Thank
yes.
you both. Yeah.
Can we move the screen? Or I guess.
Yeah, where do you want to move it to?
No, I think it's fine. I just feel bad for our one.
Well, yeah, let's angle it so that Chris can see.
He's looking at online.
Oh,
okay.
I have it open.
Okay, fair. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure everyone's comfortable. Okay, so moving on to new business. Item C, which is the Harris Place project option agreement. Yoshi, are you taking this one?
As you recall, a couple months, actually, maybe a month and a half ago, you authorized us to go to an RFQ to ask for qualifications for the Harris Place lot. And we received 3 proposals. One proposal was not for this. It was actually just sort of a general, like, look who we are, and interested in other things in town. Second, ultimately removed their interest because they felt that they didn't have the capacity to do so. But the third is the one that you will be considering today, the qualification for M&S Development LLC. And again, as we recall then, this is to create a financial and development proposal that will result in that will be considered in 6 months' time, that will come back to the select board in 6 months' time with a proposal, a financial and development proposal, that at that time you will consider and choose if you want to move forward. So what we are asking you for today is to authorize a option agreement to give them the opportunity to present you. So almost like it's the option before the option, which would be in 6 months' time. And at that time, you will then ultimately decide if you like what they proposed, is it financially viable? And they may determine that it's not, right? That is what we're doing here. And how that proposal will look will again be at that time. But again, this is to authorize the option to allow them to look at this proposal. So I want to make that very clear that this is the option 2 option.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to speak a little bit to what they're sort of looking potentially at doing, or
again, that's why this is a very high level. This is not, they're not proposing anything. They're not, they have not established anything. They're going to be looking at the space, but to do so, they wanted the opportunity to have that opportunity to present to you first.
Okay.
Because if they're going to spend the time and the money to look at this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's most important about that. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do you want to open up to select board? Liz, I think I had a hand up first.
Yeah, I have a couple comments.
Yeah.
So, I think at the high level, it's a great idea. And of course, we need the housing. I have a couple of things. First, just 2 issues, really. The one is, I had the sense that this was going to be senior housing. Is that on the table?
Yes, correct, it is.
Okay, because I didn't see that written in their proposal.
Correct, but that's something that we have to, when they're granting the option agreement, we will be putting that.
Okay, because I think that there's certainly a need in an aging population and all the, the train of housing that frees up other housing if seniors. So the other thing that I really think we need to understand and explore is underground parking, because in Vermont there's not a lot of that, because there's not a lot of land use demand. Like, we don't have the intensity and density of development that would require underground parking. So what we have in Brattleboro is, we recently had a parking study that showed that we had an abundance of parking. And so this is a project that assumes underground parking, and we don't even know how much it's going to cost because we don't have geotechnical engineering and so forth. So it's very much up in the air. And in addition to the fact that it's such a rarity, I want to make sure that we understand that it's necessary, and that it's not in and of itself something that might become an attractive nuisance. Because I think that what we have is a transportation center that isn't fully being utilized as well or as nicely as we would like. And we've had some problems with that. And I wouldn't want the same thing to be replicated with an underground parking lot. So those are my concerns about this project, whereas overall, I think it's a great idea. I'm as a land use decision, to have underground parking is something where we've never been as a town. And I'll bet you, and we could ask the planning stuff to look it up. It's rarely done in southern Vermont. So I think that we really need to explore the need for underground parking and the benefits of underground parking and the expense of underground parking. And I don't want to say underground parking anymore.
Get one more in there, maybe.
You're primarily speaking about underground parking.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Liz. Other board members?
Well, just like the previous subject, I'm excited about the possibility of this as well. I certainly would share some of Liz's skepticism about the feasibility of underground parking and feasibility from not only like there's a giant piece of ledge there that's going to cause a lot of expense to remove, or will this fall into the train tracks eventually? But that's obviously something that M&S would help us evaluate. But we should take a step back at some point and say, well, what is the advantage of the underground parking? I would think that you're thinking that one of the best advantages is that we literally wouldn't lose parking spaces. We might even gain parking spaces. But then it does bring up questions of, if it's a private management type situation of that underground space, does it need constant surveillance, as we just sort of touched upon in the public comment? Is it necessary for the feasibility? Should we take a look at our parking study again, see if a certain amount of loss of spaces is okay? So I just don't want the potential problems of an underground lot to kill the entire project just because we're really holding on to that dream.
Oh, can I just say one more thing about underground parking?
I think you've used all your. I'm gonna let. Are you responding to?
No,
okay, Liz, good.
The other thing that's very important to understand is the public-private share of the underground parking. Like, does the town the one that's going to be absorbing the greatest expense of this development, or is the developer? And I think that balance in terms of the great expense and maybe need of underground parking is not clear. And I would advocate that if the housing developer felt that the underground parking was necessary for their numbers, then that they should bear the responsibility of it, and that the public need for parking could most likely be met elsewhere.
I think that's what they're going to be considering in the financial study.
I just wanted to get that out there. And if I have anything else to say about underground parking, I will let you know.
Jess? No?
No, I'm excited to see where this one goes and what we can learn with it. I don't want to address the parking thing. It's very complicated. The underground or otherwise. I
have a comment unless Daniel.
I mean, no, I think it's an interesting, a little bit like Chloe's kind of new vision of what the Prouty campus could look like. This is a new vision of what a parking lot could look like. Parking lots are not usually the most thrilling of spaces. And so I am curious as to see what M&S will come up with in time. And I would imagine there are some impediments to this being a financially easily feasible project. And one of the things that they kind of speak to in their memo is, success in financing for complex projects, right? And so, these people are not novices in this matter, and I'm sure that they will explore those options. And I hope that when their work is done, that we have a range of options, I would imagine, right? Yeah. Ranging from extremely complex to less complex, but still quite a bit complex. And, going back to like the public-private thing, like if the town, so there's a parking lot that is currently owned by the town. Is this giving the parking lot to them or selling or leasing? Is that something that will be?
That's what they're going to consider as their financing model.
Yeah. I don't know. This is all a little new to me, and I look forward to being further educated.
Just a thought to add on to what Daniel was saying. I mean, parking lots have terrible value.
Yes.
When it comes to the public ownership.
We heard
a
year's worth is like $200.
Yeah. Even beyond that, though, like really, like if you have a place to park and you have accessible parking to those that need it, a place for a car to put your car is just about the worst use of any public space I can imagine. Okay. So the loss of parking needs to be looked at in a broader lens. And what we're talking about is converting a very low value to the taxpayers, certainly, into something with very high value, even if it involves new market tax credits. And what they're so good at is sort of putting together all these sources to kind of figure out how to make a project happen in this world of extremely expensive building that we live in now. So I think we have to be very pragmatic about converting this. It could be a beautiful, wonderful space for people to live, and the value of that, which goes way beyond any kind of minor inconvenience as to where the people that are parking in Harris Lot will now have to park. If the underground parking thing is feasible, then wonderful. But let's just not make the loss of 30 parking spots or whatever it's going to be kill a project.
Yeah,
right.
I have one more thought about underground parking.
Yeah. It's only because you're a planner that you're allowed to say these words so many times.
What Tim brought up about the low value of a surface parking lot needs to be compared to the high expense of an underground parking lot. And so you have a cheap parking space and a very expensive parking space. And that just has to be part of this calculus. And who's paying? Like if we have public cheap parking space now, and then the town's on the hook for a very expensive public parking space. That's why I think that the town can absorb the parking, as Tim was bringing up, much more easily, and that the housing development should bear the brunt of the underground park.
So I think I want to just speak to that. I think it's really captures one of my only kind of concern right now is just, what are we actually doing? We're saying M&S, go spend some money to really figure out what we're doing here. If there's a potential that there's an element of this building that is municipal owned or is rented out to us, and we don't understand that financing currently, should we understand that potential relationship and how we finance that before?
So you're talking about chicken and egg situation. Then.
Yeah.
So that's the unfortunate part of it, because they can't tell you the costs, because I just how it's going to work within financing without the opportunity to look at it.
Yeah.
Which will cost them money, unless again. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I just don't want them to spend the money and time to figure this out. And then they come back to us with a proposal with a financing that isn't possible for us to.
But that's why you say you have the option to say no. That's why I think that's why this exists, right? This is an option to an option.
Okay.
Then in 6 months' time, they would come to proposal, and you have every opportunity as a select board to say, this is not going to work for us. Yeah. This doesn't seem like something that we want to do. But
or it could be tweaked, right?
Or it could be tweaked, or you could say, you know what, we like it, but change. I think that's the opportunity. But what you're giving them now is saying they don't want to go out and do all this work to then you turn around and give it to somebody else.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have their eyes wide open that
yes,
absolutely. I mean, I would imagine they would need to spend in the tens of.
I don't know how much they would spend, but I think that they would look
not inconsiderable.
Giving the opportunity here, what they would then be able to go out for grants and other opportunities, like the town would help them in figuring out how to spend a grant. They've done this in the past on how to pay for it, right? But they need that exclusivity, right, before they can do that.
And remind us how much this would cost the taxpayers.
At this point,
we wouldn't.
No.
This
action of ours.
Nothing. Oh, this one currently, right now?
I just wanted that to be said.
$0.
And so just to reiterate one more time, because this is kind of a big thing, this is an option to an option, and 6 months from now or sooner, if they get back to us sooner, then it's going to come before the board and we're going to have another reconsideration of it.
They'll have a preliminary, right? They're not going to do a full in-depth, which, as Liz knows, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But this one will at least have some of those questions hammered out to Yeah.
And I would hope that the concerns that we raised would be part of their planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mostly considering,
Underground parking.
Since no one has said it yet, I do want to say that I have a lot of faith in this organization and these people involved. So, because nobody's actually said that.
Yeah, fair point.
They have
My
solid
actions will
history.
show faith in them in a moment.
This is a nice little
comeback.
we'll bring back. I
Segue
appreciate
to
that.
a motion.
Yeah. Unless I just want to look to the public, I don't see any public comment. Nope. In that case, I would entertain a motion.
Tim, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Over here for a little bit. I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to execute an option agreement with M&S Development for the Harris lot.
Tim has made a motion to authorize the town manager to execute an option agreement with M&S Development for the Harris lot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries 5-0. All right, so we're now going to move into an executive session. So I'll make a motion that the select board move into executive session because premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage to discuss contracts, collective bargaining, and the appointment or employment or evaluation of public officers or employees. Invited into the executive session is the town manager and the assistant town manager. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We now will move into executive session to then reconvene and close the meeting at a time uncertain right now.
Yeah.